Hi, everyone. We're so glad that you're able to join us today. My name is Matthew Atea. I am the Director of Guided Personal Supports and Community Resources here at Northeast ARC. We're really excited to get this webinar started. Our focus today is on exploring adult day supports, and it's going to be presented by the Vice President of Advocates. Brief introduction. The Northeast Transition Collaborative Network is run by the Community Resource Center at Northeast ARC. We have four community resource specialists at the moment. We have Carrie Neenan from the North Shore area. We have Mary Rothstein from the Metro North area. We have Amy Richards from the Merrimack Valley area. And we have Holly Keene currently in the Lowell area, but she will be transferring to Central Middlesex at the beginning of July. So we will be looking for a Lowell community resource specialist. If you are looking for a career change or might be interested or know somebody who's looking for a job at a wonderful organization, Northeast Arc, in collaboration with DDS, we'd love to have you. Our presenter today will be Jacqueline Valancourt, Vice President of Day and Employment Services at Advocates. After our presentation, there will be a guided Q&A by Carrie Neenan, our Community Resource Specialist in the North Shore area. Before we jump into it, I want to give a quick introduction or explanation of the Northeast Transition Collaborative Network. So we were created to bridge the gap between transition and adult services and provide that information for families, individuals, caregivers, other stakeholders, agencies, in order to provide those resources and information about adult services and what to prepare for. So we host monthly sessions, as you are all here for this one today. And we also do quarterly in-person professional developments for educators. Because we host these professional development opportunities, we are DESE accredited, so educators who are looking to claim professional development points towards licensure, you will receive those after you've completed any requirements through our network. We've hosted support groups. We had one in the Andover at the Andover YMCA for parents within transition, where they brought their transition age children to do a fun activity while the parents were upstairs during like a coffee hour, and they were able to help support one another and talk about any challenges they might be facing. It was a really great opportunity that we are looking to do again in the future. And essentially within NTCN, our goal is to unify resources, provide trainings, and create a collaborative space for everyone involved in the person-centered transition process. So if you have any questions regarding our network, we'd be happy to answer those for you. At the end of today's session, you will receive the link to our recording from today, as well as the resource guide that we've created with some events as well around exploring adult day supports. But without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Jackie Valancourt, and she's going to kick off our presentation for today.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Matt and Holly, for inviting me to present to you on adult day services in the state of Massachusetts. Just a little bit about myself. I actually started many moons ago in my career in public school system in special education, primarily in speech and language, and have been working in adult services, day services particularly, for over 15 years or so, and have worked at a couple different agencies. I've been at Advocates now for about 9 years, and I have a presentation for you. We're going to talk a little bit primarily mostly about the DDS referred day supports, community-based day supports, employment, and dehabilitation. I don't like to talk at you constantly, so if you have questions, please speak up. I know we'll have the Q&A at the end, but I'd really like to be able to address as many questions as possible, so please don't hesitate. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that? All right. Again, please don't hesitate to chime in with a question. Okay. So Turning 22 in the state of Massachusetts, the services and what to expect when somebody is has reached the age where they have aged out of the education system and moved into adult services. What to expect basically is that the school services will end, and that typically goes right straight to the age of 22. And then when the individual turns 22, they start adult services. Your transition timeline will be person centered. So you work with your IEP and your ISP team and with the family, with the provider to talk about that transition. And that can be very specific to that individual. Um, it can entail uh, several visits to the site, visits to the school from the provider, and it's something to talk about, not just in the transition to the services overall, but what does the actual few weeks and days leading up to that person turning 22, what does that look like? The adult services begin, which means that it's a change in our funding sources. So the education system, obviously, through the Department of Education and DESE, turns to the Department of Developmental Services. They are the major funding source for adult services. Service coordinators become increasingly important. They will always be a part of the individual's life and the adult services, and they start that relationship within the transition period before a student turns 22. And they are a wealth of resources and knowledge and understanding of the system. And they harboring that relationship and really maximizing the relationship with that person is important, not just for the family, but also for the educators and for the providers as well. I, Planning for a transition should begin years before the exit. And there are, I see this timeline kind of vary across multiple school systems, school districts. Um, I have a slide a little bit later on where we talk about what that transition should look like. But the earlier you start to look at providers, the earlier you start to look at adult services, the better, so that you have an informed knowledge of what is out there. I always tell people every provider is different, even though day habilitation, community-based day supports, employment, we all follow standards and regulations. However, every provider supports individuals differently. So, really seeing the program, talking to the providers, touring programs is very important. And that should begin as early as possible. The shift from school services to adult services, that entitlement based programming goes away and becomes an eligibility based. So when you go into adult services, this is funding dependent. The individuals and families must apply to the Department of Developmental Services, and you are assigned a service coordinator when you apply and become eligible for those services. You can start applying for that, I believe, age 18, 19, and a transition coordinator will be assigned to you to help you see programs, to assist with that transition and assist with some of the IEP meetings leading up to turning 22. Families ask a lot of questions of the school teams. The school teams may not know everything about adult services. So I really encourage the educators and the departments within the school system to work with families and get as knowledgeable as possible so that because they really are those first transition guides during that period. What happens after graduation? Can my child work? And we'll talk about all of these. What adult programs exist? There are several providers throughout the state of Massachusetts. How do we access DDS? What is the college what if college is not a right fit? So there are you know, hopefully we'll answer some of these questions today, but there's always more that will come up. So please don't hesitate. Schools play a critical role, like I said, in helping the families, understanding the adult system, preparing for transition, and to build that meaningful post school plans. We always say, really kind of focus on the larger picture and where would you like to see your loved one, your student in their adulthood. What does that look like, and what do you want the end goal to be? Are they independent, living independently? Are they living with you, but seeing having a job or attending a day habilitation program? It's all person centered, and really that should be the driving force when you are looking at programming. Students can access adult services through the Massachusetts Department of Developmental Services, which will be most of the focus here. There is another state agency funding source called Massability. We didn't touch so much on that, but I do have resources for that. They are also an eligibility-based agency that works with vocational training, life skills training, community engagement, and integration. They also help a lot with benefits and mass health, social security, things like that. So they are also a resource, and there's a link to their website at the end of this presentation as well. Mass health, even though day habilitation programs are funded by Mass Health, we receive referrals from DDS, but Mass Health is the funder. So if somebody is entering into a day habilitation program, that person is funded by Mass Health, but DDS is still involved and still part of the planning team. So you have two supportive programmings there. Community providers and adult service agencies going directly to an agency. A lot of agencies will do private pay, but that is unique to whichever agency that you choose to go to. And that's something that you would communicate with your with the team, with the family, with educators. I always say you don't have to be experts in all of adult services, but having a little bit of information and understanding what the options are is very helpful. And then also being able to refer to resources. So we start with the DDS, and I saw a lot of service coordinators on this call. So go ahead and jump in if you'd like to add anything. The Department of Developmental Services supports individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities across the state of Massachusetts. They provide employment supports, and we'll go a little bit into this, both in independent employment and group-supported employment as well. Community-based day supports is a day program that focuses on gaining the skills that are ready for employment. It's typically called the pathway to employment, and it's almost sort of like a go-between between employment services and day habilitation. DDS also provides funding for residential supports, and that could look very different. We're not going to talk about residential supports today, but I'm sure that the network has a webinar on that as well. The family supports, there are a lot of adult family care and in-home supports for individuals and their families, and that is definitely something you would ask a service coordinator about as well. And then they have self-directed services, which we'll talk a little bit about. And these are a more flexible type of day programming for individuals that are based out of the individual's home or their residence. And there's a lot of flexibility there, like I said, for the programming, and doesn't have the rigidity of the schedule of Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. But it's we'll talk a little bit about how that can be used incongruent with other services. DDS does refer to providers for Mass Health funded day habilitation services, even though Mass Health is the funding source and they are the governing body of day habilitation. DDS is very much involved in um, day habilitation services as well. Who is eligible? So typically individuals who with intellectual disabilities, autism spectrum disorder, developmental disabilities. The eligibility involves an application process. There is a documentation review, and that entails looking at past IEPs, OTPT speech, psychotherapy evals, behavior evaluations. All necessary documentation is provided to DDS through the school district, and they use that for the eligibility criteria. The functional assessment is conducted as well. And then you are assigned a DDS service coordinator. And that service coordinator will be your assistance through the process and will be able to help with resources, looking at those day programs and those different providers. So as I talked about, there are traditional services and there are self-directed services. When we talk about the traditional services, we're talking Monday through Friday, typically is 8:30 to 2:30. Most day programs, well, all day programs are 6 hours that they are open, Monday through Friday. And self-directed services are more um, the hours can vary. They can be after programming. You could use them in congruent with a traditional model. You can use them on weekends. It depends on how many hours are allotted and what the schedule is. But self-directed really is directed by the families, the individuals, and the provider is more of the support. The provider does not have as much to do with the day-to-day planning. And we'll talk a little bit more about the differences in the self-direction. Key differences, obviously, the flexibility, the control, the staffing responsibility, and the budget management. So these are all things that in self-direction, families, the individual have more control over. In CBDS, day habilitation, employment services, the provider provides most of that support and the navigation through the administrative things, budget, staffing, the employment piece of it. So I just wanted to stop right here. Are there any questions in the chat that we want to address? Just
I haven't seen any questions yet.
no questions yet. Okay.
If anybody
Thank
has a
you.
question, feel free to come off of mute right now and ask. Otherwise, I'll keep going.
Do you know how much money is allocated for self-direction? So that is on an individual basis. So you can, that is something that is worked through the eligibility process, and it's determined what the need is through DDS, and the budget is developed with the provider and with the family. So it's very individualized. Can someone receive both CBDS and employment services? Yes, absolutely. Anyone else hearing reverberating sounds? I don't hear any sounds. Can it be used for college programs for individuals with intellectual disabilities? There are mechanisms through some of the Massability, especially that programming, as well as some of the self-direction as well. So yes, I have some students who would benefit from DMH. Do they really have to go to Tewksbury from the North Shore, or can they do virtual meetings? I would imagine that they would be able to do virtual meetings as well, but we can provide some resources for more DMH information as well. And when we look at the DDS services, typically service coordinators, and this is an initiative through DDS that started over 10, maybe 15 years ago, and it's our Employment First initiative. And this philosophy is based on when an individual is turning 22, you really want to look at what the employment opportunities are. And can competitive integrated employment be a part of this person's life? Adults with disabilities can work successfully with the support, so that should always be something that you think about primarily. And then also just important for the educators to avoid kind of making those assumptions about employability. Focus on the strengths and the interests, because providers in the adult services work really hard to ensure that the proper supports are provided and that preference assessments are conducted. So we really focus on that person-centered planning to make sure that the focus is on what the individual really wants out of their life, what the family wants out of their lives. And Employment First allows for that independence and their autonomy in the community and being meaningful members of their community. So we always really want to look at the employment piece first, if that is viable. Supported employment can be in two different kinds of supported employment. We have group supported employment, where a cohort of individuals are all hired at one employer, and there's typically one job coach, and it is typically they go straight from their day program to the employment site with their job coach. They perform their tasks and then they come back to the day program. We have a few employment sites where maybe 4 to 5 individuals with a job coach will go. At Advocates, we have relationships with Dean College here in Franklin, where we have individuals working in the cafeteria at Dean College. We also have a number of people working in retail or manufacturing, cooking, any sort of culinary arts. We do a lot of janitorial work sometimes, clerical work, but group supported employment can be successful, and it's a step towards independent employment too. So ideally, when an individual is ready to work on a job with a job coach, we try to fade that back so that eventually the individual is working for that employer, and we are seen as case management. So checking in every once in a while with the employer, checking in with the individual, really encouraging the individual to advocate for themselves and be as independent and as autonomous as possible in that setting. But the support is always there, whether it looks like one-to-one job coaching or if it's just on a case management basis. So when we are working in an employment program and you are receiving job development and job skills training, you're working on a lot of those, not just the interview skills and the resume writing, but also some of those soft skills as well. So your communication style, your hygiene, your independence in transportation. So some of those development activities can be done within a classroom or in a classroom setting, and they're working on um, pre-employment skills. You know, how do you find a job? Where do you look? How do you present yourself? How do you ask questions of your employer? How do you maneuver through the application process? And then also understanding what your workplace accommodations are as well. So that's part of what your job coach will be doing, is talking with your employer and making sure that whatever reasonable accommodations that you require to successfully complete your job, that you are entitled and you are getting those. And placement can be individual or in a group. The community-based day supports for this is a pathway to employment. So typically a community-based day supports program runs Monday through Friday, a 6-hour period, either 8:30 to 2:30, 9 to 3. You are working on really being part of the community around you, not just where you live, but where you work, where you go to your day program. So there are a lot of volunteer opportunities there. Some of those may look like Meals on Wheels, food pantries, parks and rec, adopt-a-spots, animal shelters, things like that, where again, probably a cohort, a group of individuals with a staff person would go and perform volunteer tasks at a site. And this is in preparation for paid work. So this is, you know, you're teaching punctuality and task completion and adhering to your schedule, all of those pre-employment skills. And then there's also a very large piece of it that's recreation, it's daily living skills, it's social development, community integration. There's you know, some providers have therapy such as dog therapy. We have individuals who really love when pet therapists come in with the beagles, and it's a really enriching activity. There's also music therapy, arts and crafts, cooking, things like that. These are all things that you're working on to becoming more independent, and also just exploring the world around you and finding what your hobbies are and what you're really interested in, and you know, thinking about that employment step, that you know, I'm really love the pet therapy and I love to be around animals, would really love to get a job in an animal shelter, or I would really love to get a job at a vet. And the CBDS, community-based day supports, really provides that exposure and opportunities for the community setting. CBDS is often appropriate for individuals who need that structure of the daytime support. They benefit from the community engagement, but they can also work part-time. And to that person's question of Dawn, I think it was, you can have CBDS hours as well as group supported employment. So you may be working, you know, 4 hours out of the day, you're doing recreational activities. You may be doing some cooking groups. You're doing some independent living skills. But then, say on a Thursday, you go out to an employment site and you are working and getting paid as at an employment site. So those CBDS and employment really do work well together to be able to work off each other, and you can fade back and forth. So if an individual decides that, you know what, I don't really want to work, but I want to do all this fun stuff anyway. So I'd like to be just in CBDS. Or if somebody says, I, you know, CBDS is great, but I really want to get paid. I really want to work. So you would work with your service coordinator and getting more hours for employment, and having those supports. And again, it's that pathway to employment. Rehabilitation, as I talked about, is funded by Mass Health. And a rehabilitation program is referred by DDS, so they are still very much important in that transition and communicating with the provider of the day hub as well. This is more of a clinical model. This is more of a therapeutic model. They provide nursing services, clinical services such as OT, PT speech, as well as behavior supports, working on communication skills, independent living skills, sensory motor, gross motor, fine motor, affective development, being able to see yourself in somebody else, being able to identify your emotions, it's emotion regulation, wellness activities, lots of exercise. So those are some of the activities that happen in a day habilitation. And there are some times where day habilitation can look very much like community-based day supports, but they have the added benefit of having that medical and the clinical oversight. So if you have individuals that have some significant communication deficits, day hab is the place where they would get those comprehensive supports. Um, Day hab is often equated to being in school, but there are some differences. The schools, obviously are academically focused. It's based off of entitlement. It's curriculum driven. In a day hab, the clinical supports are on a consult model, and this is different from school systems. So, in a day habilitation program, when an individual comes in after reviewing all past documents, the provider then conducts their own evaluations, and that entails OT, PT, speech, nursing, preference assessments, as well as behavior. And all of those assessments are used to make recommendations to devise a day hab service plan with everyone's input from the individual, the family. The service coordinator from DDS is also involved in that, and from the provider and the clinicians and the managers at that program. Those assessments are done every 2 years, and it's a 2 year cycle for the day hab service plan. However, every individual is reviewed on a 6 month basis, and goals are amended at that time. So even though full evaluations are only happening every 2 years, if there's a significant change or if there is we see a decline, we would do another evaluation, and that's warranted. We work on the skill maintenance, and the development of those goals come from the recommendations of OTPT speech behavior nursing. So again, for a day hab, most appropriate for individuals who need that clinical model. And again, this is a consult model, so there are evaluations, and then those OTPT speech staff are used as resources. They may not be in the program every single day, but they're usually there on a weekly basis. Also, individuals who need medical modeling, so people with G tubes, anybody who has a regimen of medications during the day. Staff do not dispense medication in a day habilitation program. It is given by the nurse. And then some of these therapies are integrated into programming. So the recommendations from an OT on fine motor activities are embedded into the activities that are done in the day program. So if somebody is working on fine motor, then possibly a cooking group that is going to incorporate those activities is embedded into their schedule. People who are part of Mass Health and day hab cannot work during the hours that they are in day habilitation. It is not employment focused. Again, some of the activities that happen in a day hab: cooking, art, exercise, gardening, music, also community outings. There's sort of a misunderstanding, I think, sometimes that a day habilitation is site-based and that you can't go out into the community. That's not accurate. There are plenty of community activities that are available for individuals, and Mass Health is accredited by a company, agency, an international agency called CARF, and that is a recommendation. It is actually a requirement through Mass Health that each provider is accredited through CARF, and they push for that community inclusion activity. So, sensory activities, wellness programs, we talked about that. So those were the traditional service models. The provider in these traditional models design the program, they hire the staff, they manage the schedules, they oversee the budget, they coordinate the services. Parents and guardians are integrated into the team as far as, you know, getting all of the documentation, all of the evaluations, and then also being part of the team to develop those goals and objectives. Um, the advantage of that is that it's a lower family responsibility. You're not worrying about staffing. You're not worrying about the schedule of activities throughout the week. And it is predictable. It's Monday through Friday, and the schedule is set and, you know, changes from week to week. However, there typically is an established schedule. Before I get a little bit more into the self-directed, are there any questions about typical day programs?
Yes. I had a question. You said that they don't work well in day hab. I understand like not paid employment, but wouldn't we want our young adults to still be working on their employability skills and trying to achieve like one of their goals to get them to
Absolutely.
volunteer or work, but that wouldn't be done during the day hab?
They just can't get paid. That's the only thing.
Oh, okay.
So they can still perform those life skills activities and those preparations and becoming more independent. They just, if they are at a work site and getting paid, Mass Health will not fund day hub hours.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And yes,
I
go ahead, Noella.
okay. I just have a question. You were talking about the agency accredited to by Mass Health for the
Mm-hmm.
day habs. You said it was CARF,
CARF, which is
K-A-R.
CARF, which is
Oh, see.
Certified Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities, is the original name. The CARF is the acronym. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and anybody can reach out to them?
They work directly with the providers.
Okay. I'm just wondering if families can reach out to them also or no.
Typically when a provider is going through their accreditation, they will have part of the survey is that they speak to families and guardians. But they typically don't interface directly with the families as part of a transition. That's a provider-based thing later on.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want to just to be clear, the three paths you have described, employment, day support, and day hab, are not mutually exclusive and are really determined by one, individual caregiver goals and recommendations of service coordinators. Absolutely. Yes. Charlotte?
Hi, thank you so much for this presentation. Speaking from the school side, from what models have you seen that worked well for transitioning students? You talked about having students and caregivers start touring facilities early. Is there any other model that you've seen school systems do in order to share, our knowledge of the student and communicate that to the new organization?
Yes, I talk a little bit about that later at the end of this presentation, but yes, some of the things that educators can do are hold transition fairs and invite providers, invite service coordinators, invite people from DMH, Mass Ability, DDS, and also inviting those agencies to their school just to tour. And the reciprocity there is go out and tour those adult agencies as well. I have a lot of school districts and small private schools that will reach out and say, "Could I just bring my team just to see what your program looks like so that I can provide more information for families and guardians." But when you're starting early, you're starting talking about those transitions in the IEP and then really reaching out and providing resources and FaceTime with different providers and funding sources. So yes. Is she eligible for paid employment through her program? Yes. Joined late. If my child has CBDS program and she is eligible for paid employment through her program, yes, she is. She can get paid during CBDS and employment hours. Is there a straightforward path for starting paid employment if someone is primarily attending day hab? Typically, if somebody is attending day hab full time, it's not, if they're attending full time, then they're typically not ready for employment. So a lot of that time it's suggested that they do a community-based day supports, but this is all person-centered and individualized. So you can really use multiple models at the same time and work with your service coordinator, work with your area office and with that provider to model the programming that is right for your child. I'm going to continue on. The self-directed service models, the advantage of this is that it's much more flexible. It could be tailored to the individual and what exactly they need in the hours that they want it. So instead of that Monday through Friday, you may use your self-directed hours on the weekend, at night, and can be used incongruent with CBDS and employment. So if you've got a job on a couple days and you work there, but then you've got self-directed hours on a couple different days throughout the week, then that also works. So there's a lot of flexibility. The hiring of the support staff and the community activities and schedules, the family is very much involved in. So it's not all driven by the provider. They call self-directed services a co-employment model because the family and the individual are really part of the employer themselves. So they are assisting with hiring staff, training staff, and monitoring staff, as well as the outreach to some of the community activities that they do. Agency with choice is one of these. So this is a shared responsibility model. This is, families help to choose and supervise staff. Agency acts as the employer of the record. So any sort of documentation, any sort of submissions to DDS, the funding when we put in for our billing, that all comes from the agency. The agency handles all the payroll. We do all of the HR benefits for that staff. And then the families help with just directing the daily services. You work on a budget with the provider DDS to determine how many hours you're going to get, what the staff is going to get paid, what your funding is going to support, whether it's memberships in the community. So it's very individualized and could really look like anything. This is, again, greater flexibility, personalized schedules, familiar with staff relationships. You've reduced that administrative burden, which compares to like the self-direction. So self-direction, a lot more administrative, the hiring, the paying of staff, all of that is really on the families. Agency with choice, the provider takes that and supports that. It's a good fit for families wanting involvement, but without that full employer responsibility. The self-directed and participant-directed, this is the highest level of flexibilities for families. So the families and the individuals are the ones who manage the budget. They hire the staff directly, they set schedules, they design services. You may or may not have a staff with them at all times, but this is also very can self-direction money be used to hire same age peers for social activities? It's a good question. I haven't seen it done at advocates, but let me do some sleuthing and I can get an answer on that. So again, the participant directed programs are the most flexible for the families and the least amount of support from the provider. But they are there for administrative activities and for helping with design and fine programming as well. So when we talk about the transition, and I'm just watching the time, it's 11:18, and I do want to leave some time for more questions. The transition planning best practices from the school is to begin early. You talked a little bit about some of the strategies that you could use, inviting adult agencies to meetings, holding transition fairs, encouraging families to go and tour programs at any point, including like real world experiences and self-determination skills. So really getting out into the community and doing some volunteer vocational work, things like that, and incorporating in community resources as soon as possible, because that's what the providers for adult day services really use. Here's a nice timeline use as a guideline. So when a child turns 14 to 16, that's when you really want to begin that transition conversation of what it's going to look like when this individual leaves school services. 16 to 18, you're discussing with DDS the eligibility. 18 to 20, and I say even earlier, you can really tour any agencies whenever you want. And most providers are really open to that. Some of them will hold open houses and have ongoing open houses for the turning 22 population. So really going and seeing the programs. I can't stress this enough. Go and look at as many programs as possible. Develop post-school plans. So what does that look like as far as, you know, that last year of school and what is going to be happening once they really start? And you're really talking about the nitty-gritty of like, okay, we've narrowed it down to a couple providers. We know that we want day habilitation, or we know that we want this. This is when you're talking about the nitty-gritty of it. And then 21 to 22, you're basically finalizing the adult services and you're working on the transition plan to moving into those services, whatever they may look like for the individual. Person-centered planning, adult services, this is our focus. What does the student enjoy? What environments work best for this individual? What support level is needed? What are the student's strengths? What does meaningful adult help look like? These are all the types of things that providers are going to be asking of families and guardians and individuals, and so that they have a better sense of what you are looking for in when this person becomes 22. Building self-advocacy skills is very important in that transition period, you know, up to starting at 14, making choices, communicating preferences, the safety skills, being able to ask for help. Can you say no? Do you have self-preservation skills? Are you self-aware in the community? Understanding some of the accommodations as well for job placement, that's very important. And then participating in the IEP meetings, participating in the transition meetings, participating in the tours. So it's great to have families and educators go and look at the program, but I really love it when they bring the student as well because they need to see it and experience it as well. But self-advocacy is one of the strongest predictors of adult success. The more input they have into their own lives really provides a level of independence that everyone is striving for. Again, some of the community safety, public transportation. Transportation is a big thing and sometimes can be a barrier as far as getting to and from programming. But this is something that, especially in the employment world, we work very hard with independent vendors and alternative mechanisms for transportation and making sure that individuals are as independent as possible and are aware of the safety skills and being able to utilize all different kinds of transportation. A lot of the providers will actually support transportation training within their community-based day supports, within their employment, because it is part of the employment programming. But again, these skills can all be used before 22. Families may worry about staffing, safety, social opportunities, loss of school structure, adult loneliness, transportation future planning. Those are all a lot of the concerns that come up in transition meetings. And again, to mitigate these concerns, seeing and speaking to providers is going to ease that worry and going and seeing programming in action. Questions that some of the families should be asking DDS are, what services are available locally? Are wait lists involved? And yes, can be wait lists. Services are dependent on resources and availability. Can services be combined? Absolutely. But that is specific to the provider as well. They may have their own philosophy about things. So again, going and seeing multiple providers is very important. The self-direction options that we talked about, agency with choice, how can those be used incongruent with CBDS or employment? And then how are staffing needs addressed? You want to know, what is your recruitment? And, are you comparable with pay with other agencies? What does your retention data look like? So ask about the staffing as well. Ask about ratios. Typically, CBDS is a 1-to-5 ratio, but if a need is identified and supported by DDS, then there is mechanisms to have smaller ratios. Some of the things I suggest that families ask providers when they go through a program visit is look at the staff interactions. Ask about their community partnerships, the individual choices in their schedule. Talk to the individuals, take a look at the engagement levels between the individuals and the staff. What are the opportunities for employment that are out there? How many employers do they work with? And, ask about how long people have worked in those jobs. What has been their retention for that as well? And then also the communication supports, not just for the individual's communication, but for the communication through the employers and the other community resources as well. Questions: how are goals developed? How is the progress measured? What happens if changes are needed in the plan? DDS and employment and CBDS have a different reporting function than mass health rehabilitation programs, but as I talked about before, goals are developed as part of a team with the individual given from the assessments and preferences and wants and needs of the family and individual. Progress is measured on a 6-month basis. And if something needs to change, then plans can be amended as long as the entire interdisciplinary team agrees with that. Key takeaways: adult services are individualized. There is no one right path. Employment and community inclusion matter. Families need guidance, and early planning improves the outcomes. Can't stress that enough. Early planning. And then some of the websites are DDS Self-Direction, the Turning 22 Services, and Habilitation as well. And those are the fact sheets for those programming. I am going to stop sharing and go ahead.
It looks like we have a
Noelia,
couple questions in the chat. And yeah, Noelia, you have your hand raised. You want to go first? All right, some of the questions from the chat, people were asking for lists of programs and kind of how they find out about different programs that are available in their area. What's your suggestion for that? Is that something that comes from the transition coordinator at DDS, or through other families, or how does that typically work?
I think there's multiple avenues in order to do that. So yes, your transition coordinator in DDS, they have a list of all of the providers that are there and what programming they do provide, as well as your advocacy groups, so like the ARC and some of the family support groups that are out there. Connect with other families, because other families may have seen something that you didn't. So it's really important to connect with other families as well. And the school can help with that as well.
And can young adults who have started receiving residential services in a group home setting use participant-directed services as part of their day supports plan?
Yes, they can. I've seen that typically with people living in a residence, that they have a pretty robust schedule of activities through, just through the staffing in the residence. But if they don't have a particular day program like a community-based day supports or day habilitation, self-directed can be used during the day. Yes.
And Mary asked, are there any programs that have an inclusive component, disabled and non-disabled? My son has an intellectual disability, but has always been in general education.
Again, this is where you really want to go and look at programs and look at the population of that provider. And service coordinators can help with that a little bit. Massability, and now remember, when you are working in employment as well, if you have an individual job, you're working with typical people. It's a typical job within a typical community. So that is the best way to get that integration. And we, again, do a lot of volunteer work through CBDS and employment as well, where they get that exposure.
And self-direction may be an option for a family like that as well, too.
Yes.
I think if a typical day program is not something they're necessarily interested in or think would be a good fit, that might be the road to go.
Right. Agreed.
And then someone was asking about the age you're assigned a transition coordinator, and I see that Rachel from the North Shore office recommended or mentioned applying for adult eligibility at 17 to 17 and a half. So if you're found adult eligible at that time, a transition service coordinator would be assigned to work with the individual until age 22. And just a reminder to families too, if you are child eligible, you still have to go through adult eligibility separately when they turn 17 and a half. So that's a separate application process, even if you've been connected with DDS when they're a child. And then, Mary's asking for information about info sessions just on self-direction. Mary, I can send you some information about that. DDS does do, I believe, is it, Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong, monthly sessions about self-direction. just with like general information about how it works?
Yeah, it's monthly. I think there were dates set through June, so I
Yeah.
can look for the flyer if you don't have it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll check that. If I had a flyer a couple months ago that listed out the dates for the spring, so I'll just double check if I
Okay.
have updated dates
That's
for that.
definitely something that I know DDS was really pushing on providing a lot more info sessions for because it is such a unique
Yes.
model, the PDP and as well as agency with choice.
Yeah, and I know our area specifically was requiring families to attend one of these info sessions before discussing a budget for self-direction. So that way they really, had an understanding of how self-direction worked before they started talking about specific plans.
Mhm.
Oh, and Mary has the link for the sessions in the chat here. So thanks, Mary.
Awesome.
And then Brad's asking, does adult eligibility also likely require a reevaluation to reaffirm their disability?
That would be a question for DDS for their eligibility. You don't need to do a reevaluation for the disability for a provider, but
I can speak
DDS.
to it a little bit.
I was going to say, not to put you on the spot, Rachel.
Yeah,
but...
no, it's okay. I was just replying. And Brad, I think we worked together in the past. But you would need to submit a neuropsych within the last 3 years that also indicates their IQ score, as well as the 3-year school evaluations and any additional school evaluations that were completed. And then you do have to submit the diagnostic evaluation that indicates the individual's diagnosis.
Yeah, so yeah, typically within the last 3 years, because yeah, schools will do the evaluations every 3 years. So DDS will want to see the most recent evaluations from school, and they do have to have that adult IQ testing on there. So Rebecca Anderson just chimed in from DDS too and said you need to have adult IQ testing at the age of 16 and the appropriate testing to determine if they're on the spectrum of ASD. You need to have some testing to confirm that diagnosis. Anybody else have any? Noelia, did you have a question? Tried calling you on there
Yes.
before.
Yes, sorry, I was on mute asking my
That's okay.
question early. I apologize. My question, well, I have two, but while we're on DDS, and oh my gosh, now I forgot that question. Okay, I'm going to go back to my original question. On the day habs and um, the services and goals and things like that, who represents families and is part of the family team when they go and visit these day programs, since it is through Mass Health funding?
When you go and visit prior to coming, when you're choosing any agency?
Well, prior and during. So if you're in the day hab and it's covered by Mass Health, I believe technically DDS is not.
They're not the funding source, but at Advocates in the Day Habilitation program, we always include the DDS service coordinator so that they are aware of what is going on, and they are part of that team.
Okay, and they can speak on behalf of families and things like that. Do they still have
yep.
Do they also have an ISP still?
So yes, and typically, well, I shouldn't say typically because every provider does this differently. Sometimes there's a separate day hub service plan meeting separate from the ISP, but if you line them up correctly, then you can get them in one meeting and you can talk about their ISP where you talk about their residential services, but then you also talk about the day hub service plan. It's just separate documentation.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? I think we're a little past 11:30 now, so unless anyone else has any questions, I'll turn it back over to Matt to wrap us
Actually,
up.
one more. Can you qualify for DDS before adult DDS before 18? So say like you submit your paperwork at 16 and the documentation is there. Are you able to receive DDS service, adult DDS services at that age?
Mhm. Yep.
Thank
We
you.
have people who have transitioned earlier that have received the eligibility and have transitioned before 22, but that's a very specific person-centered planning kind of option, if it makes sense for that individual.
And Rebecca Anderson, who's our regional contact for family support in the Turning 22 program, said eligibility for adults starts at 18 and adult services are provided upon graduating with a diploma if it is before 22.
Sorry, can I just jump in to add
Yeah,
that?
go for it.
Sorry, I was quietly sitting here, but I can't hold my tongue any longer.
No, that's fine. And yeah, I mean, specific questions like this for
Yep.
DDS, I think it makes sense to have you answer these.
Sure. So adult eligibility officially starts at 22. There are folks that are on the ASD spectrum that do not have an intellectual disability and excuse me, and they would apply for their adult eligibility a little bit earlier than someone with an intellectual disability. So they might apply around 18, but that adult eligibility is still not going to start until either they have graduated with a diploma or they are, at the other side of school. They have to be all done with school. So that's an important piece. And adult eligibility starts at 18, but a lot of the services don't start until 22. However, children's services goes all the way until 22. So there's that overlap there that you continue to be connected while you're working on the adult eligibility.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Absolutely.
All right, so if nobody else has any other questions, we'll get this wrapped up for you and send everyone on their way. Matt, you want to wrap it up?
Yes, thank you, Carrie. Let me just share my screen real quick. Back to my slides. Awesome. But thank you, Jackie, for your expertise and knowledge on adult day supports. And thank you, Carrie, for facilitating this. And also want to thank Rebecca Anderson and Rachel for chiming in and helping us with any questions regarding DDS. It's really nice that you guys are here to help answer some of those questions. So we love it. So following the session, you will receive the slides from today's session, as well as our resource and event guide, which will provide some information about, a little bit of information about adult day supports, and then we find some community events for transition. You'll also receive a link from today's recorded session as well. All of these materials can also be found on ecommunityconnections.org. It's our site that we provide. We try to look for free events, accessible spaces, and all other abilities activities. So feel free to check out our website, www.ecommunityconnections.org, and see if you could find anything relevant to what you're looking for. And if you're looking to claim that PDP, if teachers are still here, we know you got some busy schedules. Make sure you complete the feedback survey. It is a requirement. It needs to be completed within 30 days to be eligible for PDP. And then you'll also receive that 3-month and 6-month survey to show us, to explain how you demonstrate how you've been able to utilize the content from today's session. And we love everyone's feedback. So even if you're not an educator looking for PDP, please fill out our survey. We wouldn't be able to do this without you guys. We want to know what you want to hear about adult services and transition, so we can continue to provide these opportunities for you. This feedback survey will also be in that post email. I do want to thank the CRC staff for working so hard in getting these sessions up and running for you guys, our presenters, and anyone else affiliated with our network. Again, we can't do this without you guys, so please continue to join us, share your feedback, so we can continue to provide these sessions for you. Some upcoming sessions in July, we're going to be doing a 2-part series on financial and benefits planning. On Tuesday, July 14th, we're going to be focusing on like SSI and SSDI. We have, I believe it's work opportunities. Is it work opportunities unlimited? Carrie? Yeah. Want to get confirmation. And then we have plan coming to talk about ABLE accounts and special needs trusts and other types of benefits on July 21st. We'll be sending out those links for those webinars with that follow-up email and just continuing moving forward. In August, we're going to be focusing on healthy relationships and boundaries. We're still connecting with our contacts, but we'll let you know who will be presenting that in the near future. And in September, we're going to be focusing on navigating the transition together, exploring DDS Adult Services. The North Shore area office within DDS will be doing monthly webinars on transition, and we're going to be hosting them in September. So be on the lookout for that as well. And if you have any other questions or feedback, we'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to Community Resource Center at ne-arc.org. You can always check eCommunity Connections for more information. Reach out to us. We're happy to support you. And thanks again for joining today. We look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
All right.